He'd lived in this neighborhood for more than 20 years. He knew every house, every tree, every mailbox. His street was quiet, peaceful, predictable, and he liked it that way. Okay. Then one morning, everything changed. Okay. As he sipped his coffee, watching the sunrise over his garden, he noticed a house directly across the road. It was a big, beautiful home, the kind with dormer windows and white pillars and enough bedrooms to raise a small army. Except he was pretty sure that house hadn't been there the day before, so he put down his coffee and went to investigate. He walked up to the house and ran his hand along its surface. The paint was still wet, and there was a faint smell of sawdust in the air. He looked around for a building permit or construction notice, but there was nothing. He talked to his neighbor, Mrs. Periwinkle, who had lived next door for 40 years. But she had no idea when the house was built or who put it there. He even asked the police, but all they could tell him was that the house was legally constructed and the owner had all the proper permits. But he'd asked for the house's blueprints and they couldn't provide them. Something about a state law that prevented the release of that kind of information. So he was none the wiser. He never found out when the house was built or who built it or why. But what bothered him the most was the windows. They were huge floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked his property. At first, he thought it was just an oversight, an accident of poor planning. But then he started noticing other things. For instance, all the trees on his property had been cleared away, even though the house was too far away to have blocked the sunlight. And all the shrubs had been replaced with perfectly manicured hedges that were exactly the same height. All the flower beds had been filled with gravel. All the pathways had been torn up and sealed with black tar, and all the mailboxes had been removed. But the thing that bothered him the most was the windows. They were always watching him. Whenever he stepped outside, he felt like he was being watched. Whenever he looked up, he felt exposed, naked. And whenever he tried to ignore it, he just ended up paranoid. Was someone spying on him? Was someone living in that house watching him? If so, who was that person? What did they want? Why had they chosen him? What had he done to deserve this? And why had they chosen this house? Why had they picked this street? He had so many questions, but unfortunately, there were no answers. The house had been empty for months when suddenly, one day, a moving van arrived. Men carried boxes into the house. A woman stood by the door and watched them. She was beautiful, tall and elegant, with long flowing hair and eyes that glistened in the sun. When she saw him staring at her, she smiled politely, and he quickly looked away. He didn't want her to know that he was watching her, but how could he stop himself from watching her? She was amazing. She moved into the house with 2 children, a boy and a girl. The girl was about 8 and the boy was about 6. They played in the front yard while their mother watered the flowers. He watched them from behind the curtains. He didn't mean to, but he couldn't help himself. It wasn't their fault. He just found children fascinating. One day, he saw the girl picking flowers from a nearby garden. When she turned around, she saw him staring at her. She stopped and stared back at him. He quickly looked away. He didn't want her to think that he was creepy or weird. But then she came up to his window and knocked on it. Startled, he opened the window and asked her what she wanted. Said she wanted to play and asked if he would join her. He hesitated. He really wanted to, but he didn't want his neighbors to see him playing with the little girl. But when she looked down at her feet and said, "It's okay if you don't want to," he immediately agreed. They played in her front yard until sunset. He told her stories, made her laugh, and watched her become best friends with his dog. When her mother called her inside, she waved goodbye and promised to come back tomorrow, and he believed her. Children always keep their promises, but she never came back. He waited all week for her to return, but she never did. Then, one day, he saw the family moving out. They took the girl and the boy with them, and when he waved goodbye, The girl waved back. She had remembered him. The house stood empty again. He never saw the family again. The house remained empty for another year. Then one day, lights turned on in the upstairs window, and when he looked up, he saw a man standing there. The man was tall and thin, with dark skin and sharp features. He was unlike anyone he'd ever seen before. The man started coming out of the house every evening. At first, he just stood by the window and watched him. He didn't mind at first, but then the man started making strange gestures. And sometimes he tapped the window with his finger. Sometimes he pressed his palm against it. Sometimes he held his hands in funny positions. Sometimes he mimed throwing objects at him. And sometimes he just stared at him without moving. He tried to ignore him, but it was impossible. One day, the man disappeared. He waited weeks for the man to reappear, but he never did. The house stood empty once again. As the years passed, more and more families moved into the neighborhood. Children grew up and left. Parents aged and died. New houses were built. Old houses were demolished. But that house remained empty. Its windows remained dark. Its lawn remained overgrown. It became a local legend. Everyone knew it was empty, but no one knew why. Then, one day, he saw the lights turn on. He watched as a young couple moved into the house with 2 children. They were nice people, friendly and polite. We waved at him when they saw him watching them, and he waved back. It was nice to see life return to the house. It gave him hope that maybe someday he could get past the strangeness of it all. Maybe someday he could forget what had happened there. But then one night, the children were playing in the front yard, and he saw the girl looking up at his window. She stopped and stared at him, and he quickly looked away. She knew what had happened here. He never got to find out why the house had been built, or who had built it, or who had lived there, But he did find out one thing, The house had eyes, cold, soulless eyes that watched and waited and yearned for something. Whatever it was, it never came. Whatever it was, it never will. The only thing that came of it was pain.